Good morning and welcome to Thoughts and Updates. I'm in a different part of the garden because we have a couple of bird feeders because clocks are going back. We're now in winter, and this is a kind of dual purpose. Not only does it feed the birds, and we've also got squirrels that come down, and just round there we have a little bit of a pumpkin thing going on, and also there's nuts been thrown out for the squirrels, but also observing it all is our cat Smudge, who we now call this cat TV because she sits at the window and watches all the things that are going on, and we've got a lot of wildlife going on. The pumpkin is there not just for the squirrels but also for the foxes. We have urban foxes that are round about, and a lot of excitement. I think about a year or so ago where the foxes had nested just underneath where I'm standing just now. And there was lots of little cubs in there, and of course, as you can imagine, that became quite an interesting focus for everybody in the house, and they stayed there for a little while. It's the same time I normally record this, but it's much lighter this morning, mainly because the clocks have fallen back and we're into winter time, and it's freezing, which is quite nice, I have to say. So this week, let's get right now out of the way. I've been back on writing stuff and for Ringside Report. I'm just about to finish my third piece, which is looking at what we over here think about things over there. It's called From the Kale Yard. Those that understand are Scots know that a kale yard is a place where we have a kind of mythical view of the past. But this is a slightly different kale yard as we're looking across the fence or across the pond at our American neighbours. Also, Lewis Ortiz was the focus of my boxer of yesteryear, and Mr. Trump this week had his run-in with the Orange Aid about his performance in the debate. And talking boys, there's been Sergei Lipinets fought last night. The Russian ended up in a draw, a majority draw, which continues the whole thing about things being quite difficult and different within the boxing world. We've got a big weekend coming up with Matchroom back on, but for this weekend there's not been much. And reflecting back in the last week, massive amount of controversy and phone gate has come to an end, where the judge came in and I think has proven that it wasn't a phone that he was holding and looking at, it was probably just his notes. So we move on. Terry O'Connor was the judge concerned. In terms of any kind of theatre, there's been nothing I've looked at much this week. I watched a wee piece from the Traverse during the course of the week, but I need to get back on and review some stuff. National Theatre stuff coming up that I'm in line to get my head round. And for Scottish Football Supporters Association, a lot of work this week on the Love Book and getting out there in terms of looking for extra contributions. So if you're watching this and you love a particular football club, check online to see if we have a contribution with regards to your club. The big ones, of course, are Aberdeen, Celtic, Hibs. These are not being picked up yet. Livingston's another. So please don't hesitate to get in touch. And finally, we also, for Scottish Football Supporters Association, have done, in terms of rivalries, is the stuff I'm editing this morning, because two Ayrshire College students, one a Celtic fan, one a Rangers fan, have put their rivalries aside. They're both wheelchair bound, and they have contributed to a book that has been put together by Nil by Mouth. And I've also done a certain Mr. Gerard and a certain Mr. Morris Ross arguing over the cost of a kebab, as my take on what's been happening in the world of football. I also got an email this week from TRAM Direct, a company that I've never actually been to see at the Shed in the south side of Glasgow, but yet again one of these companies who are struggling to survive because they don't have the plug-in to the intelligentsia and the funding that most other companies have, because they've never been seen as being intellectually or creatively worthy, a bit like a lot of freelancers. So as the money is rolling out to support certain aspects of the arts, there are forgotten aspects which are equally deserving. which takes me into what have I learnt this week. And there's a couple of things. First of all, the debate between Mr. Biden and Mr. Trump. From over here, it was, yes, a much more civilised debate. It was, yes, the winner was probably the person in the middle, the referee, rather than the two combatants. Joe Biden did enough, I think, to continue his rise to gaining the presidency, but Trump once again did his usual, which was to obfuscate and avoid anything close to the truth. But we know that its old hat is beginning to get a little bit boring. This time next week we will be on the cusp, on the weekend before the whole debate turns into an election. And fingers crossed that what is going to happen here is that we're going to end up with a new president and a new epoch for America. And as I was saying last week, the change in European elections over here is that the alt-right, those who in the past had been the people that had risen on the back of like Trump or Orban out in Hungary, or indeed Putin in Russia, are now beginning to see their influence wane. So hopefully I will be talking very differently. You can just see, I think, just there, a little squirrel has come to visit, looking for his breakfast this morning. So, fingers crossed. But the Democrats have got to continue to push. Double-digit leads can disappear overnight, because the people who are going to vote for Trump are not necessarily going to admit they're going to vote for Trump. And that's one of the things that over the last week I've been listening to. Tremendous work done by The Guardian, going out there in terms of the podcasts and also the documentaries, looking at states other than Washington and how Trump has let them down, and also how he is faring out in these swing states. Fingers crossed, but there's still a way to go. Still a way to go. And even after the election, we all know, given what Donald Trump has been saying, that there's a possibility that this could go to the Supreme Court, could go to legal arguments, because apparently, according to Trump, before even a vote was cast, it was the most corrupt election ever. Whilst politics has raged over in America, it's fairly got a cob on over here. Marcus Rashford, the English international and Manchester United forward, has once again hit the headlines campaigning for free school meals for children in poverty-stricken areas over the Christmas and the October periods, all holiday periods, in order to support families in need. And the response from the government is not to have free school meals, but to give £1 billion over to councils to allow them to target the resources where they're most needed. Now, here's the thing, right? I can't stand this whole thing about targeted resources. In the United Kingdom, we have a great deal of pride in the National Health Service. The National Health Service is not targeted. It's a universal free process where if you're in need, you get it. You don't pay for it. I've talked about this before. I talked about this a couple of weeks ago in terms of how tax should be used and should be paid in order to support those things which universally we should all have. And we've lost that connection. It's now beginning to rain. But I'm going to stay here and get this done. So, what we are looking at is the idea that if we can get resources targeted at greatest need, what we're able to do is to alleviate the worst excesses of what is going on in the world. That's the theory. Here's the practice. That means that there is always and consistently a line drawn between those in need and those not in need. There's a division created in our society that means that if you get free school meals, you're going to be targeted by the person standing next to you whose family doesn't have to get free school meals. You're going to be seen as being a deserving case, which in some cases means that somebody somewhere, particularly a Conservative MP, might actually see you as a non-deserving case. It promotes division. And whilst I am not suggesting that middle class kids who have got really good, in fact no harm, a child is a child. As soon as we start to create a division between them, what we're attempting to do is to mirror the division that we're attempting to obliterate. And yeah, It does mean that what's going to happen is that there are going to be excesses and there are going to be people who take advantage of it. They do already. But they don't take advantage of the opportunity to gain any kind of support through state offerings. Then companies who avoid paying tax, who avoid paying the types of tax that end up supporting the most vulnerable. So yes, there are companies, and hats off to them. There are communities, and more hats off to them, who have rallied together in order to support the most vulnerable by paying for meals, by paying for food, by supporting food banks. And there are Conservative MPs who think this is absolutely wonderful and exactly right, because it should not just be the state who step forward. Yeah, it should not just be the state who step forward, but we should be a country where feeding a child is a right, not a debate. And if we do that by providing free school meals for every child in the country, and we provide free school meals during the holidays to support every child, we support social interaction, we support the opportunity to get together, we support them getting out, being about, because we know that the coronavirus does not necessarily transmit itself through schools. And these could be the focal point of each community to rebuild this country to be better than it was before. Otherwise, we go back to normal. What's normal? Ask the Child Poverty Action Group what it was like before. Ask Women's Aid what it was like before. Because if we are getting children out for free school meals, that may well be an opportunity to put resources and services into schools which are more adult orientated during that time, to allow those who may be suffering from domestic abuse in their home a chance to escape for a few precious hours. By being kind, it brings something more than the kindness itself. So, targeted resources does my head in, because what it actually means is not efficiency, but denial. So, from this week till next, stop raining now. From God's own country and a place where we feed the local wildlife. Be good to each other, be kind, and I'll see you next week. Bye for now.